Ever since Dragonflight, we have been focusing a lot on the laugh but learn situation, right? Like trying to be a little bit educational and laughing at the funny moments in Mythic Plus and just trying to be lighthearted about it. But this kind of all started when I started running into players that I felt like the general community needed to be aware about their behaviors of. And we are back to that today because we have a really offensive example of something that simply shouldn't be allowed in Mythic Plus. And you could debate a million different ways to solve it, but we just continue to stack evidence for the fact that Blizzard just simply does not care about the pug community if they let people do what they do in this video and walk away scot-free. Absolutely ridiculous. Let's take a look at this right now. So good friend of the channel, Harry, in this footage you're going to see him play Discipline. Now he tried it early in the season, it didn't work out, but I think it's going a lot better for him now, and he's actually been playing on US too. So I told him that as soon as he is ready to do his first 12 on this character, we will definitely do it together. So stay tuned for that. Who knows when that's going to be, but as of right now, he's still working his way up, doing a 10 Dawnbreaker as Discipline, and it's important to recognize why it's a 10 because they already tried the 11 and they did fail it. So I believe the tank in the key is a viewer of his or something like that, and then we have 3 pugs. Now funny enough, we did invite an evoker, but it is actually a devastation evoker. It's losing to a tank on the first pull. Don't worry about that. You don't have to worry about that. At least it's actually there as something other than Og, but so far so good. You know, Dawnbreaker, one of the easiest keys of the season, honestly maybe one of the easiest timers in a long time. It's rivaling some of the dungeons of season 3 of Dragonflight at this point, especially on sub 12. After adding that 90-second thing to the lower keys, I haven't gotten any direct feedback from this, but I really don't think anybody was ever struggling with the actual timer. Was there ever a group doing a sub 12 that had like a very clean run that didn't upgrade the key? I highly doubt it. But throughout the footage, you'll see a relatively recurring theme. It may not be the most clear, but to the left of my camera is the DPS chart. And you're going to see the Rep Paladin. He is substantially beating the other 2 players. This may be a conversation point. It isn't in the actual footage. It never gets brought up once in this dungeon. But, I think right now it's not unfair to say that Rep Pally is the easiest spec in the game. Maybe the easiest spec ever in the game, honestly. I think it's not a bad thing at all to play an easy spec. A lot of people look at it as it's maybe a boring thing to do or even like a cheap thing to do to potentially switch to something easier to play. But in reality, the dungeons are hard enough, and especially the community make it even harder. So the way I look at it, if you can replace this guy and get invited to a key where he could have got invited instead, then you're doing everybody a service. So we get to the boss and we again 0 deaths, no problems whatsoever. Timer is clean. I mean, Harry doesn't have those breakpoints like I do, but pretty sure we're definitely on pace to double upgrade this at this point. DPS chart looks a little bit more normal now, right? Rep maybe not the strongest single target spec, but it's easier on, so things are starting to balance themselves out. Realistically, doing a great job. Harry is kind of struggling his disc. I think he's still learning at this point. I don't know exactly how far along this is in his journey, but this is a tough fight as the healer, especially if the other range don't help you bait. I don't think they're doing a very good job. They're doing a decent job, but as you see, both him and the Ellie Shaman are standing very close to the boss right now, and this is a pretty big mistake. Tank kind of just like runs him right into the middle of all the puddles, which works out. It's whatever, it's a 10, it fights over at this point. So they're going to clear the first boss and all of that trash with 0 deaths, okay? And this is the end of the key, so watch this. Now, I don't really know what this strategy is here, where they're just like landing on all different structures in the dungeon, but I think the reality is it doesn't really matter as long as whoever is pulling makes their decision quickly, and it doesn't seem like that's happening. I don't know where the tank is. I have no idea what he's doing, but the Paladin drops down, and for some reason he just pulls when everybody else is not ready to start, especially the tank, and he dies to that. Those are 3 deaths now to that indecision, and then he leaves. Have him up here, 2,500 players struggling to finish all the 10s, it looks like. And I think this is one of the things that you might see is somebody who's willing to tank is likely not going to be somebody who's as patient and willing to stick around for mistakes and stuff like that. But funny enough, we actually have a Twitch link there. Went to that. I wanted to see, just because if he was actually streaming at that time, I'd be very much interested in hearing what he had to say about that group, but there are no VODs found. What is found though is something that I think is very notable. Here's a rule that he has listed as part of his chat. I guess his goals with his chat. It says, treat others as you would want to be treated is a shaky proposition at best. They could just as easily have different needs and not want to be treated like you want to be. So instead, treat others as they would like to be treated is more to the point. Sounds like he's preaching being patient with others and respecting them, something he failed to do in this dungeon. You know, I think the big things to take note of here is just how comfortable this timer is, and the fact that, I mean, this isn't even a wipe. Like, they didn't wipe here. I don't know what this tank is doing. Let's try to look at this again and see. So they're both going to land in this house, Harry and the tank, and then for some reason, all the other 3 players are going to land down there. Is this common? Do people do this where they just like land on this building? But yeah, there's the tank right there, and as you see, the paladin just like goes off on his own, and then like people start following them down there. I don't know if it's like actually just another Lemmings situation like we had in the Ruby Life pools. I don't know what the tank is doing. He's just like AFK, probably typing something. And then the fucking people follow him. Where are you going, bro? Don't you realize he's dying? Like, what is this? They actually just straight jump off the platform. But basically 3 people just suicide. And the reason that it looks like the tank isn't aggroing the stuff is because he's typing about something. The paladin says, can I get pain suppression like 54 seconds into the poll, then corrects himself saying 5 seconds. And during that time, the 3 DPS decide to suicide, and then one of them leaves. Now, I want you guys to hear Harry's legitimate reaction to this, because I think it really drives home the point of how offensive this actually is.
They left. Oh my god.
Watch your step.
Imagine.
Watch your step.
Killing yourself.
Watch your step.
By just landing on top of mobs and then leaving. Like, I have not got the I couldn't even do that. I wouldn't have the cheek to do that. I wouldn't even, like, I die through landing without the tank, yeah? Going in early and dying, and then I leave. What? Crazy. There's some crazy people out there.
It's a big issue with the game in the way it's designed too, right? Because Harry tried to do his own key here. He had it at 11. They failed it. I don't really know anything about that failure, but, you know, obviously it didn't upgrade one way or the other. It's now back down to 10. The keystone system is setting him up for this, right? Like, it's setting him up for this chain of failure that you almost kind of are waiting to tilt into. Like, I don't think anybody really likes going backwards no matter what. Like, nobody is like, man, I can't believe we failed at 11, but I'm excited to go do the 10 now, right? Like, everybody's going to be like, let's just try to get this over with. And I think in some situations that may lead to sloppy play, maybe making it harder on yourselves, but there's nothing really going on here. It's really a perfect run up until this point. And one guy just, yeah, simply like in the chat has said they're ego gamer. Like, that's really the end of it. I mean, I don't even know how you do this. And I think Harry's reaction is the right one. Like, it's unjustifiable. I don't want to hear anybody defending this. If anybody does this and you leave when you are actually the first person to die in the whole run, you have an enormous amount of time at this point to leave a 10, especially a 10 this time in the season, and you're acting this way. It should be bannable. It really should be something that you're action for. My recommendation has been to silence people, because, you know, that's not necessarily an action that is against any types of terms of service or anything like that, but it's pretty clear that these people should not be allowed to continue pugging and ruining other people's keys. And this is really the problem with the keystone system, because like, you put your group up and any person out there can be invited to the key and could just behave this way without any repercussions, and you as the key holder are left standing there with a broken key for no reason. Like, that key was not going to not be an upgrade because you randomly flew into trash while the tank was typing, right? Like, what is the point of leaving there? Not a word was said in the chat. Nothing of any type of consequence at any point happens in the dungeon other than that one mistake where, yeah, that for some reason, I don't really know what the whole land on the roof thing is, but for some reason the tank decides to do that and then decides to type for a little bit, and the DPS just forget that he exists, and they said, hey, let's see if we can go do that. Who knows if the other 2 were also ready to leave too after that, like just randomly flying into trash and pulling stuff. And this is actually another great example of why I was worried about Dawnbreaker too, because I feel like this dungeon was set up for this, and Blizzard really did make a bad dungeon because of that. I think it was clear from the get-go that people were gonna find themselves in this situation a lot, and it could have easily been avoided by Blizzard. I don't know necessarily how they could have made the design the exact same way they did, but not allowed DPS to just like randomly fly into trash and somehow blame the tank for that. But they definitely could have did a better layout, and they definitely could have did a better situation with the flying. I really think the way they should have handled it was you could only land and get off your mount in those like golden circle things that are meant to be like safe havens. I'm not even really sure what the purpose of those things are, honestly. Like, they look like they're supposed to be places you're meant to land, but who's doing that? Like, our peers? Nobody would be doing that, right? But luckily the dungeon has become such an easy dungeon, and it is such a free timer that all the woes of that usually are absolved. But as we see here, sometimes they are not. So let me know what you guys think about this. What level of like offensiveness awareness would you give this? Obviously, I think a lot of the times we looked at things that are like kind of toxic, like people arguing with each other, people being hateful towards each other, but just from like a check of a box type thing, like, do you think this should be supported gameplay? Do you think that Harry's key should go backwards because of this player? Do you think that this player should be able to just then go sign up to another key and do whatever he wants without any repercussions? For what it's worth, this is why I always whisper people who behave this way, because I think the game is just simply not giving them any feedback that they're doing anything wrong. And I try to think of it from those terms. So I think the only real way to solve this is to just let them know, like, hey, what you did was not fair to everybody else in the group. You made a mistake and now you're going to punish everybody else for it as well as yourself. I mean, you really do waste your own time too, right? Like, why even bother signing up to a key that you're going to behave this way in? And I think it's been actually working kind of well. There's been a lot of times when some of the feedback comes back in a way that I would like to see it. You could see the gears turning, like, and if everybody who was put off by this type of behavior just actually stood up for themselves and did something about it, then I think the community would clean itself up. People are prioritizing something other than what the game is trying to prioritize, and the game could change its priorities, yes, for sure, but at this point it doesn't seem to be happening. Like, the game doesn't seem to care about us as puggers whatsoever, so it is on us as a community to clean ourselves up. And I think especially in a slam dunk case like this, like, you can't let these people just walk away and think like, oh yeah, that's totally fine, we'll see you guys in the next key. Anyway, leave your thoughts. Thank you for watching. We will see you guys in the next one.